So, firstly and foremostly, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dhammaya, Namo Sanghaya. Okay? Refuge in the Triple Gem. What is the need of the me at this moment? Okay? What is the need of the me at this moment? Well, me is built by need. Me is needing. Drop me, no needing. Who are you if you don't need something in particular? Who are you if you don't need someone in particular? You are no one. So look at the needs that you think you have to understand the me that is not there. Okay? So work with, for example, that your need may not be gotten. The getting of your need is completely up in the air, not up to you in any way. The me depends on need. So generosity will help you to slowly remove the wrongness, the confusion, the delusion, the ignorance of me, the delusion of the separate self. Okay, and this is what we're going to be working with today. Welcome in Tads. We're going to be talking about Buddhism today. We're going to be talking about direct realization today. We're going to be talking about dependent origination, or the formation of self, the formation of me. Okay? We're looking today at teachings from Ajahn Sumedho, and this is a collection that the Ajahn Chah tradition, Amaravati publications put out about direct realization. All right? And if I was a better teacher, then I wouldn't have a need for this, and I certainly wouldn't have a need for me. But what if that me doesn't exist from the start? Then where is the better or worse? If there's no need, then where is the me existing? If you say, oh, I don't think I need anything right now, then what is me? What is the self without needing? It is nothing. So dependent origination, the formation of self. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means, from Pali, ignorance conditions the kamic formations, i.e. body and mind as defined by the five skandhas. Okay, so the five skandhas are the ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. So ignorance conditions the kamic formations, i.e. the body and mind. So ignorance conditions the body and mind. That is, when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth. So this is a kind of a rare notion, all right? This is a strange notion. What is the truth? Where in our society and where in our culture and where in our own minds are we looking at this question of what is the truth? Do we care what the truth is? Are there levels of truth? Is there an ultimate truth? Is there a true truth or a false truth? What is truth? Do we care what the real truth is? Or do we only care about our desires and our stories? You can ask yourself that. Do I care about what the real truth is? Do I care what the real truth is? And how much do I care about the truth? If you don't care about the truth, then you should stay about as far away from me, and you should certainly stay about as far away from Buddhism as is physically and mentally and spiritually possible. Being a Buddhist is caring about the truth, and you don't need to be a Buddhist to care about the truth, but that's what Buddhism is about. That's what Buddhism cares about. Buddhism cares about the truth, as if Buddhism was a thing that could care about some other thing, which of course is not the case. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the karmic formations. So karmic formations means that your body is not your body, or the body is not something separate from anything else, but rather, okay, this is very important, rather the body is a coming together of conditions, cause and effect. Limitless interaction of phenomena that are not things, because they don't exist separately or independently from other things. Things don't exist in nature. The earth doesn't exist in nature separate from everything, separate from the universe. The nature or the reality or the truth does not discriminate in such a way. Okay? So this means ignorance conditions the karmic formations, i.e. body and mind as defined by the five skandhas. So pointing here towards the body and mind. You can call it your body and mind, but how can you own cause and effect? How can you have possession over the environment when you are not separate from the environment originally? Now, if we knew this and recognized this more deeply inside of ourselves, perhaps the notion of destroying the environment would be less digestible, would be less realistic. It wouldn't make sense to harm the environment for the benefit of ourselves. And we don't really know what that self is. We haven't questioned it. We haven't looked at it deeply, that question. And that means when it comes to self as being fundamental to our society, our community, and how we live our life, we haven't questioned the fundamental truth. We haven't considered about the truth, have we? Not much. We haven't given importance in our lives, many of us, many of the times, and this is just a kind of speaking to give a kind of mental construct in which we can continue to do our work, continue to do our research into the truth. Okay? So that is when we operate from a position of ignorance, that is not understanding the truth. So when we operate from a position of not understanding the truth, and everything that we experience and do and say and feel is conditioned from that ignorance, absolutely everything. Okay. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the karmic formations, so that the body and the mind, as they are at this moment, are karmic formations rather than separate self-entities, rather than my body or your body, etc. So ignorance conditions the karmic formations, i.e. body and mind is defined by the five skandhas. That is when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth, and everything that we experience and do and say and feel is conditioned from that ignorance. Absolutely everything. So, bringing up a perspective that everything that you do, everything that you say, everything that you think, and everything that you experience is conditioned from that ignorance or lack of understanding, Conditioned is dependent upon it. That what you are doing is dependent upon not understanding the truth. That the formation of your body, that the formation of your mind, and your here is not ideal, working on it. That the body and mind, as they are experienced and known, is conditioned by not understanding the truth. And when we operate from a position of ignorance or from a position of not understanding the truth, and what is the truth? Great. Let's bring it up. Let's talk about it. What is the truth, right? So that is when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth, and everything that we experience and do and say and feel is conditioned from that ignorance. Absolutely everything. So what is the truth? Okay, we have a comment from Natalie Sutherland. Perhaps learning about the truth is caring about the truth. Staying away from Buddhism does not seem to be a way to learn or care about truth. Why would Buddhism have gatekeeping? It seems those who don't understand the truth would be most in need of truth. You'll have to explain yourself more clearly. So it's difficult when we try to express ourselves through text. It's very difficult. What is the truth? Are we allowed to ask that question? Are we allowed to talk about that? Because it seems like there's some sense, my seeming about it, is that there's some sense of asking what actually is the truth is fundamentally perceived as not that important. And would the truth be an idea? How could the truth be an idea? Does that make sense, that the truth would be an idea? Does it? Does it make sense that the truth would be an idea? Are you an idea? Am I an idea? Are trees ideas? So why would the truth be an idea? Something that's supposed to be fundamental. Something that's supposed to be very special, very profound, very deep. It's supposed to be that. Who says that the truth is that? But why would it be an idea? Why would a suitable replacement for life, what we call life, be an idea about life? Or an idea about our own life, or an idea about someone else's life? I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but is life actually, the word life, the sound life, is that pointing to an idea? The word Buddhism, the sound Buddhism, is that pointing towards an idea? Is your here, right, is something we have to look at very closely, but is this experiencing an idea? Is this experiencing something that can really be summed up with words and phrases, concepts, sounds? This experiencing is clearly inclusive of sounds. It's inclusive of ideas. It's inclusive of stories. But is that what this is? Is that what this is? And whatever that could be, couldn't it be anything? Couldn't that be anything from time to time? And wouldn't that always be conditioned by not grasping? If we don't grasp on that, then this is just this. But if we do grasp on that, then won't this, whatever this is, open question, open dialogue, if we grasp onto that, then wouldn't this always be conditioned by that? So what if we don't grasp onto that? Then this is no longer conditioned by that. If we can stop grasping onto that, whatever that may be, then this will be free. But that's still this and that. So because of this, that is. What is this and what is that? What is the truth? What is the experience of not being attached to anything at this moment, for example? But if we say at this moment, if we look at it from the perspective of at this moment, aren't we now creating something that wasn't originally there? Where did this moment come from? Can we really say this moment? What is this moment? Is this moment that? Let's keep learning how to not depend on this and that to live our lives. Now, avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the kamic formations, i.e., body and mind as defined by the five skandhas. So ignorance or original grasping conditions the kamic formations, i.e., the body and mind as defined by the five skandhas. That is, when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth. Okay. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the kamic formations, i.e., body and mind as defined by the five skandhas. That is when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth, and everything that we experience and do and say and feel is conditioned from that ignorance. Absolutely everything. We heal family by healing ourselves. We heal the world by healing ourselves. And we heal the self by realizing that the self is an illusion. That the self is like a dream. Now, we have dreams, okay? Or dreams happen, don't they? And sometimes dreams can be the most horrible nightmares of imprisonment, of suffering, even of torture. People have dreams like this. Dreams can also be, or that dreams happen like this is more fair to say. Dreams can be so brilliant, lovely, pleasurable, wonderful, isn't it? But without waking from dreaming, where does dreaming exist? Dreaming is defined by its temporariness. So also, the experience of a self, the experience of me, is defined by the need of me. Me and need go together. Without need, where is the me? The me is always needing this and that. The me needs ignorance. The me lives through ignorance. The me lives through not understanding the truth of dependent origination, or this is because of that. And that's that. This is because of that, and that's that. The formation of self. How is this self being formed? How is this feeling of me being formed? How is this sense of you being a thing separate from that being formed? Really, we are here to talk about this and that. Understanding this and that. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the kamic formations, i.e. body and mind as defined by the five skandhas. That is when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth, and everything that we experience and do and say and feel is conditioned from that ignorance, absolutely everything. This is where the self-view is such a blind spot. When we think of the kamic formation, so kamic formation here is kind of like a happening, a happenstance, right? So when causes and conditions come together, this and that express themselves, right? So kamic conditions have come together to bring me this teapot, okay? And bring me this teapot, I'm saying a little bit too much, but if we saw this teapot and we thought that this teapot existed by itself, we would be wrong. If we saw this teapot and thought that this teapot was a separate self-entity, that it was like a separate object from everything, that would be wrong. That would be ignorant. Now, it appears to be separate. It has a certain sound. It has a certain smell, it has a certain moisture content, it's in a certain place, a certain person, so we would call it, is holding it. So it would seem to be by many, many factors, some kind of separate self-entity or object, right? And yet, this teapot cannot be, has never been, couldn't be separate from everything. That's concerned with the truth, whereas saying that this teapot in any way exists separately from anything else is not the truth, is ignorance. Okay? So if we attach to this teapot, and so to attach to a teapot, there has to be this and that. And this and that that's not seen clearly, not seen directly, right? Because there needs to be a this that can attach to that. That this and that inherently are separate self-entities, that they have independent qualities unto themselves. When in fact, the teapot and I, for example, inter-are. The teapot and I inter-are. Teapot is because I are. Isn't it? So, if I hold this teapot, then in some way I am inherently attached to this teapot because I am attached to I and teapot. But if I take away the I, and if I take away the teapot, such as it's just like this, where can attachment take root? So the self view is our ignorant view, is our problem view that we're working with here. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the karmic formations, body and mind as defined by the 5 skandhas. Sometimes a well has water in it, but it's a deep well. Sometimes the best wells with the best water are deep wells. So if you just kind of look into the well, you may just see darkness inside of it. Isn't it like that? Even though you are thirsty, and even though that well has some of the best water in the world, or even the best water in the universe, a universal well of pure freedom, because you've just kind of, even though you're thirsty, you've just kind of stepped over to the well and looked down, you only see darkness, and you say, oh, the well is empty. So sometimes we have to not just look deeply into the well, but we also have to wait until the sun is in the right place. Or we need to get a bucket and a rope and lower ourselves, or lower that bucket and rope into the well. We need to test, we need to look, we need to experience, okay, to know about it. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions the karmic formations, i.e. body and mind as defined by the 5 skandhas. And the 5 skandhas are the 5 skandhas: form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. The 5 skandhas are aggregates, or the 5 heaps of aspects of the happening. Okay? Forms, like the body, feelings, emotions, perceptions, the perceptions we get into our mind about things, mental formations, okay? Mental experiences, mental states, and consciousness, or the quality of awareness. So that there is no you and I in this situation. There is no teacher and there is no student in this situation. There is not a ground on which we can stand, but rather it's a matter of neither ground or we. Certainly not me, but more so a kind of groundlessness. A groundlessness that is transparent. a groundlessness in which me is nothing. And if it is something, it's nothing in particular. It's not something that's separate from everything, immediately and originally. And always and already. Slow and steady, says the turtle in the soup. Dependent origination. What's this about? What are we talking about here? Dependent origination, the formation of self. Avijja pachaya sankhara. This means ignorance conditions. Ignorance conditions the kamic formations, i.e. body and mind. That is when we operate from a position of ignorance. That is when we operate from a position of ignorance, not understanding the truth, and everything that we experience and do and say and feel is conditioned from that ignorance, absolutely everything. This is where the self-view is such a blind spot. So we're talking about the conditioned ignorance of the blind spot of a self-view. We all together now? We are talking about the conditioned ignorance, the greatest blind spot from which we act and think and do and feel, from the ignorant blind spot of the self-view. The ignorant blind spot of the self-view. The view from and the view of someone. And we get locked into that. And that self-view, that wrong view, that grasping or that kind of holding on to the view of being someone, or the view of someone in general, or the view of something in general, or the view of some place in general, is not the truth. That in truth, someone does not exist. In truth, some place does not exist already. Not in terms of you understanding it. That's the ignorance, that you could understand it. That you could know where you are. You cannot understand you, because you is ignorance. The view of you is ignorance. And it also is the grasping onto, or the tension in the body. This kind of reflexive tension in the body, defensive tension or aggressive tension. But tension in the body does not represent a self. It is just tension in the body, such that the bird singing is just the bird singing, and it's not even that, because it's already before this or that. All the time, always, originally. So what we're working on here is not as much deconstructing the self-view as it is realizing the alreadiness of the absence of a self-view and the absence of a self-experience, of a me experience. Okay, we'll be back in just a moment after a word from our sponsors. And we're back. Hope everyone's doing well. So we're looking, we're not giving up just yet, even though we may encounter some unexpected difficulties and barriers that, just as hot as fire, right? But we can try to continue on the path, regardless of that. So we're looking at this teaching from Ajahn Sumedho, and we're going to backtrack a little bit to try and get a better handle on this great matter, this matter of utmost importance, okay? So, dependent origination, ignorance is self-view. So that ignorance, or not understanding the truth, okay, bear with me here, is the view of a self. Or is the view of a, what we can call a separate self-entity that exists. All right? A separate self-entity that exists. Okay. The uniqueness of the Buddhist approach is called anatta, the realization of not self. Now, when the Buddha was once asked, is there a self? The Buddha said, the Buddha didn't answer that question. The Buddha didn't answer the question, of, to say, no, there is not a self, because that wouldn't make sense, right? Only someone would answer a question like that. But the Buddha was not someone, so the Buddha did not answer that question. And what this points to is the subtleness of grasping. The subtleness of grasping in which you can drink water, or you can see if there's any liquid in the teapot without being attached, without being someone that is doing that. In the same way that nature can take place, or nature can happen without there needing to be a someone that is nature, or a something that is nature, right? Simple. Very, very simple. And concerned with video games, I'm not against video games. I'm open to playing video games, but frankly, it's not something that's very engaging or interesting to me. Not interesting to this comic formation that is conditioned by ignorance. If it were, sometimes I try it out. But it doesn't work, so I just leave it at that. I don't try to force myself to play video games in the same way that I don't try to force this body and mind that is conditioned by ignorance to not play video games. Right? I'm open-minded about it, okay? If there's a new game that looks really good, let's give it a shot, but, that's not my cup of tea at this time, all right? So dependent origination, ignorance is self-view, that the self-view is the wrong view. The view that you are someone and the experience of you being someone or you being separate from everything immediately already is not true. And not experienceable either. Where is the experience of the self? Really, if we have enough space in the heart, in the mind, where is the experience of the self? Where is the experience of someone? Now, there are many apparent experiences of a self. There are many appearances of someone, and there are plenty of people who will chase you around, hitting you on the head with the notion that you are someone or that they are someone. I must be one of these kinds of people in some sense. I'm a monk. Let's talk about Childism. Let's talk about Buddhism. Let's get enlightened. Let's save the planet. Let's create free Walmarts that also offer health care, okay? But doing without attachment, okay? Doing without attachment is the important point. We're working on it. But we've got to become enlightened first. And who is it that could become enlightened? How could someone become enlightened? How could a monk become enlightened? Right? How could something become that thing if this and that are conditioned to each other? How could a cause become an effect? Cause and effect inter are already, always. Okay? And at the moment, free Walmarts are more accessible and possible than freeing Palestine, so that shouldn't discourage us, but that's the reality, it's something to be aware of, okay? So the uniqueness of the Buddhist approach is anatta, the realization, and this is the key word, right? The realization of, not the belief in no self. The belief in no self is not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha did not teach for us to believe in not self. The Buddha did not teach that. Okay? But the realization of what the Buddha taught is the teaching of the Buddha and the experience of the Buddha. Okay? Buddha blessed this beat, as they say, or as they have said. The uniqueness of the Buddhist approach is anatta. It's a Pali word, anatta, which means not self. The realization of not self. The particular style of reflection in structures like the Four Noble Truths and Paticca Samuppada changes the way of thinking from the self view of the soul and me as an absolute to anatta or not self. Okay. The uniqueness of the Buddhist approach is anatta, the realization of not self. Anatta is the realization of not self. The particular style of reflection in structures like the Four Noble Truths. So what is the structure of the Four Noble Truths? Okay. Now this has been phrased in a lot of different ways, translated in a lot of the different ways, because in the time of the Buddha, they did not use written language. They used phonetic or sound-based language. They didn't use written language. So then the written language that was used to put down the sound language of the Buddha was called Pali. So this word anatta is from Pali. It's a Pali word, and it means the realization of not self. So the Four Noble Truths are that, so these are the Four Noble Truths of this. The Four Noble Truths of this. That there is suffering, and that the cause of suffering, or the cause of unsatisfactoriness, the cause of our grasping stress, our constant state of stress, or our constant state of being in some form of turmoil, some form of unsatisfactoriness, that the cause of this unsatisfactoriness is a grasping, and sometimes called desire, sometimes called aversion. But it's a grasping onto this or that. This instead of that, or that instead of this. That's the cause of suffering, right? And that the third noble truth is that there's an end of suffering. That in this, there is an end of suffering. And in that, there is also an end of suffering inside it, before it, already. Also. So, that there is, finally, that there is a path to ending suffering, and that the path to ending suffering, okay, the path of uprooting grasping, or the path of uprooting ignorance, the path of uprooting the self-view, the view of separation, okay, is Buddhism, is what Buddhism is about, is the Eightfold Path. Okay, and the Eightfold Path is a big system, so I like to say it a little bit more so in this way. This practical approach of uprooting the self-view, or ending suffering, or attaining nibbana, attaining freedom, is something like this. Dana, which is generosity, which is practicing generosity like you were boxing, okay? You get into the boxing ring because I don't know why, and you... So dana is about doing actions of generosity, all kinds of actions of generosity in all kinds of different ways, with a lot of heart, a lot of gumption, a lot of sincerity, a lot of depth to do good, to help, to be generous, to share out, to give away, to help. Okay? And from that generosity, to be virtuous, to be mindful and to be virtuous, sila. Okay, dana, sila. So be a virtuous person. Do more of what you should do and do less of what you shouldn't do. But generosity is essential to that. If you can't find a way to practice that boxing, okay, to practice, to prepare for the reality of the suffering that you're experiencing and will continue to experience in the realm of you, if you can't do that punching on the pad, even though you're not actually in a situation, then when you get into a situation, you won't have the capacity, you won't have the wherewithal and the forethought to bob and weave and to... because you haven't been generous enough to try. You haven't been generous enough to try to help, to try to release, to try to put down, to try to settle. That's what generosity is all about. So when we get to sila, or when we get to skillful living and following precepts or being mindful, it incorporates itself into all aspects of our life. So we can, in all aspects of our life, we may not be able to practice generosity because that's panya wisdom, that's the wisdom of detachment, okay? But what we can do is we can do many different actions of generosity that prepare us or develop the capacity within ourselves to not do certain things and to do certain things, not because it gives us pleasure or helps us avoid pain, but because we see the value in giving away and sharing and helping itself. And then we apply these precepts, or we apply this mindfulness to our entire life. Now from that we get into bhavana. You're doing actions of generosity in your life, and you're serious about it. And you are now following precepts, and you're also remembering mindfulness in your entire life, in your life as a whole. You're serious about being mindful as a whole. Now we can talk about bhavana. Now we can talk about training the mind through meditation, through mindfulness of breathing, through vipassana, through samatha, through jhanas. Jhanas is next. So then we get into samadhi, or absorption into a non-grasping way of being. A way of being that is natural to not grasp. A way of being that is natural to not hold on to this and that. Okay? And then we get into prajna wisdom. We get into the experience or the realization of not self. So prajna or panya or varapanyo, the highest wisdom, is the realization of not self. Okay? So the uniqueness of the Buddhist approach is anatta, the realization of not self. The particular style of reflection in structures like the four. So as a Buddhist, as a practitioner, we are reflecting upon ourselves all the time. I was speaking with some young people, some people under 18 recently, and they were talking to me when I was bringing up, some of the issues that were in their community, some of the social issues that were there, and how people were expressing themselves. They brought up to me that, that Bhante, you have to kind of understand that we are living in a very different way than you are, inasmuch that your entire life is about reflecting upon yourself, right? Not analyzing or reflecting upon yourself all the time, as much as you can, that's what your life is about. And so naturally, the quality of discourse or the quality of engagement is going to be quite different, and that's really true. The quality of our life is going to be very different dependent upon how much time we spend reflecting upon ourselves, or the experience of what we call a self. Looking at the experiencing rather than chasing after this and chasing after that. Okay? So the particular style of reflection in structures like the Four Noble Truths and Paticca Samuppada, which is dependent origination, which is understanding this is because of that. Dependent origination is just the Buddha saying this is because of that, but completely. He says it completely with full knowledge, with full understanding of the truth. The particular style of reflection in structures like the Four Noble Truths and Paticca Samuppada changes the way of thinking from the self-view of the soul and me as an absolute to anatta, or to not self. The problem lies in the fact that not self seems like annihilation, and what frightens people about Buddhism is that not self and no soul sound like an absolute position that one has to take as a Buddhist. People who hate God and resent Christianity may become Buddhists because they've got a grudge against God, the soul, sin, and guilt. They really want Buddhism to be a kind of atheistic philosophy and a total rejection of the whole Christian experience. But that is not what it is. Buddhism is not atheistic or nihilistic. Buddhism is not atheistic and not nihilistic. And what that means is that Buddhism is not rejectionist. Buddhism does not reject. Buddhism is not about rejecting a self. It's not about rejecting anything, just like in the same way that it's not about grasping anything. It's not about holding on to anything. The experience of what we call the self, and even more so, the experiencing that is taking place at this moment, that is already before a self or the notion of a self, consistently and already and originally, again and again. The Buddha was very careful to avoid such extreme positions of atheism or nihilism. Instead, his teaching is very skillfully and carefully. Instead of being stuck in an extreme position of atheism or nihilism, the Buddha was very careful to avoid such extreme positions. Instead, his teaching is a very skillfully and carefully constructed psychology. Its aim is to help us see through and let go of all the habitual attachments, attitudes born out of ignorance, fear, and desire that create this illusory sense of a self. Buddhism, its aim is to help us see through and let go of all the habitual attachments, all of the habitual perceptions, all of the habitual feelings, all of the habitual notions, all of them. Not just yours, because yours isn't even real. Yours isn't even true. Already, originally, before, after. Even before, after did not exist. Which in some ways seems to be self-evident. But that's the problem. That what is evident in self is empty of self. That what is evident in everything is empty of everything already. And it's certainly empty of anything in particular, which is the everything that is not something already. Its aim is to help us see through and let go of all the habitual attachments, attitudes born out of ignorance, fear, and desire that create this illusory sense of a self. So for over 2,500 years now, Buddhism has managed to survive and keep its purity, and it's really unique in that way. And that is because its approach is very clear. There is a Sangha living under the Vinaya discipline, and there is the teaching of the Dhamma. If we practice with this in the right way, we can really begin to see the suffering and misery we create over the illusions about ourselves and how we project that into the world. The illusions that we have about ourselves lead us to a position in which we advocate for illusions about others that do not apply to them. Isn't it? The point let's go back. If we practice with this in the right way, we can really begin to see the suffering and misery we create over the illusions about ourselves. We are not trying to create important, and this is one of the fundamental issues that people are dealing with in this world of spirituality and in this world of non-duality, and this is why most people cannot teach effectively. And that means that they can't have students, or they can't have followers, or they can't have supporters, because they've created inside of themselves the illusion of not self. And the illusion of not self is not what this is about. The illusion of not self is just as wrong as the illusion of self. See? So it's very subtle. Because you can believe that you don't have a self, that doesn't mean that you can help other people and that you can show them the clarity of that there is not a self already. So it's very subtle, and it's a place where our conceptual mind or our intellectual mind is to just only to be used. It's only to be used to follow the path and to detach. The point in Buddhism is not to go from the illusion of self to the illusion of there is no self, but rather to investigate, contemplate, and have insight until the ineffable truth is realized by each one of us for ourselves. Each one of us has our own unique experience. We don't all experience exactly the same things. We have different memories, experiences, tendencies, and habits, and yet we always relate these infinite varieties to Dhamma teachings. So we are not just making totally subjective interpretations. We apply the Dhamma teaching to our experience in order to be able to communicate and understand it in a context that is wider than that of personal subjectivity. Often people deviate in their practice because religious experiences are interpreted too subjectively. Right? Like, I am having this experience. That's a problem. That'll be a problem. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints? So, in this work of what we call meditation, primarily what I recommend is that you stop grasping on this and that, and you start alreadiness. But that alreadiness is not something. And so it's a kind of space or spaciousness in which there is already not something. And in that spaciousness, we notice that tendency, that appearances come up, but that returning to already is already, immediately, without effort. And it's not particularly easy to do this because it's not particularly anything. It's not particularly easy or difficult. It's not particularly anything. And so in that already, what you may be able to notice more of is this and that. And allow this and that to be perceived or experienced or to happen without giving importance to this or that, even though this and that are taking place, but aware of the model of this and that, the causal connection between this and that moment by moment. So that, like my self-experience, for example, the illusion of my self-experience directly correlates to this, is because of this, as much as it is because of anything else. It goes together with everything. And this is also everything, even though it appears to be something. So this is where the alreadiness is quite pronounced. In the particular sensation, the everything experiencing without grasping onto this as being separate is already. So the self view is fundamentally a grasping view, a clinging view. It is a clinging view on separate entities. That this is separate from that. But what we need to realize is that this is because of that. This and that go together. The alreadiness. All right? So the alreadiness is already before alreadiness. But if we aren't generous, we can't feel this. We can't see the value in it. We can't see the pronunciation of it. You see? Because when we are not generous, we don't value alreadiness. We don't value that what is already there is too much. And so that too much is not to be figured out, but it's to be freed out. It's to be blessed out. It's to be brightened out. But until we start to develop a relationship with generosity in whatever way that you're entangled with life, so that if you're someone who's very attached to money, if money is very important to you, then you need to be generous with your money. You need to start using your money generously. And this is also how we fix the problems of the society. But you're not going to be much good, you're not going to be much useful until you can start working on it in the way that you can work on it. To be more significantly and fundamentally generous. So that the alreadiness it is already accessible. It is already and always before me. But in this conditioned body and mind that seems to be producing illusions of me, there is not a value on giving up or putting down or giving away. Right? It's like we only have to put down because of some necessity. But nothing is necessary, just like nothing is required. Trees are before requiring, for example. The earth existed before requiring existed. Requiring is this self-notion, this wrong view. You don't require anything because you are an illusion, or the appearance of you is an illusion. The feeling of you is more like a tension in the body. Or a tension in the mind, a very subtle electrical tension in the brain. But the brain also is nothing. The brain doesn't exist. That's just an idea. It's like, does a body require a brain? No, because the body existed before requiring. Bodies of material, which is what this is, and this body is certain particular materials that we can point to, like water and earth. Those elements already existed before requiring existed. Trying to meditate is a mistake. Trying to be generous is a better method than practicing meditation or trying to practice meditation. Meditation reifies the self-view, whereas generosity breaks the self-view. Generosity is a chain breaker of the self. Now this is a practice to be applied. This is a praxis to be applied. It is empty of separateness and it's empty of importance. It's empty of someone. It's empty of separation. It's empty of emptiness. But for the most part, my recommendation is that trying to be generous and trying to do actions of generosity is better than trying to meditate. And that very often meditation reifies the self-view, reifies tension in the body. That before we try to meditate, we should try to be generous. We should try to do actions of generosity, big actions of generosity, exciting actions of generosity, revolutionary actions of generosity. Okay? So thank you to all of the allies and supporters supporting my life as a monk, and supporting our recent advocacy work concerned with Childism, and all those who are supporting this mission of the propagation of the Dhamma, the true Dhamma, the Prajna Dhamma. May you be blessed, and may you find out that there is already no me. Okay? That's it, friends. That's it. See you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is a meeting to share or to discuss non-duality or Advaita. Advaita means not two. So what it doesn't mean is that everything is one. What it means is that it's not two. The reason they say not two instead of one is because what it's pointing to, of course, is not two either. It's that what is, or this, is unspeakable. It's a mystery. It's unknowable. It's undefinable. It's not able to be understood or pointed to because it's not separate. There's no position in it. There's no where to point to this from. The not two that's being talked about is a not two that is already everything. That everything is absolute. And that's this. This is the absolute. There is only the absolute. So, a logical question from that would be, if there isn't two, and there is no position, why say it? Why would anybody take the time to say, there is not two? Because it seems that in the middle, or within this not two, there arises an experience which calls itself I or me. So this experience which arises within the not two calls itself an I, calls itself me. And that experience, as all experience, is an experience of duality. Now the experience of the I is very simply a contracted sense in the body which gives the experience of a here, a position. That position is immediately an experience of the search for meaning. It covers over not two with the search for meaning and makes it appear as something it's not, real, solid. And within that, or with that, is the search for meaning and purpose. So there's an experience that arises within that says, I am real, I have free will and choice, and through my free will and choice, I will find the meaning and purpose which I experience missing. The problem for that experience, and therefore the message of the word not to or Advaita is, there is no real duality. So that experience is completely illusory. And when that experience ends or collapses or stops happening, one thing that's recognized is it never happened. There never was duality, there never was two. So that's basically the ideas behind what's being shared here. And because the message is there's not two, there's nothing missing. There's nothing that needs to be set right. So in this meeting as well, there's no expectation. There's no need for anything to happen or not to happen. There's no demand on the individual for anything to be different or anything to be done.
You said it cannot be pointed to,
Yeah.
that it is, but still people keep pointing.
Yeah.
And isn't it a help in the beginning?
No. I mean, it might seem to be a help, yeah. The thing is what's being helped and what's being looked for are never actually separate. So it's impossible to say that finding nothing is something happening, or that nothing happening is something happening.
What I'm trying to say is, now I'm sitting here and listening to you, and I can.
But you're not. If there's someone sitting there,
Yeah.
they're doing everything they can not to hear what's being said. And no one chose to come here. And if it's heard, no one will hear it. This is absolutely the last thing an individual wants to hear.
Yeah.
And when it dies, it's recognized it was all it was looking for. We're not talking about anything special. We're talking about simply this, what's happening. The individual lives in a psychic reality which has something else, which is in this big, complicated world where there's a real things that are happening and has free will and choice that are going to be able to change its experience to what it's looking for. And when that collapses, all that's left is this, what's happening. And that's all there is what's happening.
Still, it seems to be a road to nothingness.
Only in the dream.
Yeah, but it is the experience of searching, yes. The separate self is searching and finally sees,
No, it doesn't.
was it here? It
No,
was here.
no, the individual never sees this. The individual dies, the story dies, and what's left, which is all there ever is what is. It's a dream. that there's something else is a dream. And that there's a path, or that seeking serves a purpose, is a dream.
You said there's no path.
Oh, I don't know that I did, but that's true.
Well, whatever. But coming here is also a path.
Nobody came here. In the experience of the individual is that this, what seems to be happening, is dependent upon what happened before. What that does is it's a perspective that I am real, what's happening is real, and is a consequence of what seemed to happen before. When that imaginary world dies, it's obvious that what is not dependent on anything. It's not the consequence of anything. And it has no need to be what it is. It's absolute freedom appearing as this, independent of what was appearing before. What was appearing before is equally real and unreal as what seems to be appearing now. That and this are both this. There is nothing else. The individual lives in a world of something else. It's called hope. There isn't really anything else. There's just this. It's really simple. All that's being pointed to is that this is all there is. And it doesn't need to be what it is, and it doesn't need to be different. The individual lives in that world of consequence and succession and contingency because it lives in a world where it's searching for something. So it needs there to be something else, somewhere else, where it will, through its free will and choice, find what it feels is missing. So it's dependent upon this succession being real. It's dependent upon it. It's not. There is only what is, and it appears, in that case, as real succession. It's not real succession. It's just what is appearing that way.
What would you say the collapse of the individual would be?
What is it?
Yeah.
It's the end of something that never happened. And it sounds a bit paradoxical, but when it happens, that's exactly the way it looks. It's the end of something that never happened.
I know what you mean. On the other hand, it looks like there is an event called the collapse of an individual.
Well, that's not the way it was here. The event that you're talking about was, for me, an unevent. It was the end of something that never happened. It wasn't actual positivity, something additional. It was a loss. But it was a bit of an odd loss because it was a loss of something that never was. So it wasn't an event.
Calling it an event is like there is a point where something is, let's say, new.
Exactly, and that's exactly what didn't happen. There is only the new. Just when there's this experience of duality, there seems to be something that's old, something known.
Mm-hmm.
When the individual dies, falls away, when the known dies or falls away, it's recognized nothing was ever known. There is only the new. That's not a positivity. That's not something that happens and is added in as new information. It's the loss of something that never happened. It's the loss of the experience of knowing. So it doesn't really happen. The The individual would think that this, what is, would change if it found what it was looking for. That there's something in this that it doesn't have or needs to find for it to be what it thinks it should be. That would be a positivity, if it would find that. That's the illusion that it lives in, that there's something missing. There isn't anything missing. There is nothing that's incomplete. There's nothing that needs to be put right. This is already what is. So what's lost is the experience that this isn't it. That's not an addition, because this is only what's looked for. That's not an addition, it's not something given to it, it's a loss of the experience that this isn't it.
You know, one thing, loss, but loss is something that was and now it isn't.
Well, I'm also saying something that never was.
Yeah.
So it's a non-experience. I mean, the point is we're trying to explain something that can't be explained. We're trying to communicate about something that can't be talked about. So, I'm doing my best. It's a non-experience. It's a non-happening. And when it happens, it's recognized that it's actually not worth talking about.
Yeah, but we still keep on talking about
because
doing stuff.
Because there's an individual that thinks that when it happens, it'll mean something. It'll be special.
What's weird, in my case, it's like you see it at some point.
Yeah.
In this way you're talking about, but you're still going back.
But it's not over yet. Seeing that there isn't anybody isn't the end of there being somebody.
Mm-hmm.
What happens sometimes is that the individual collapses or is recognized as never having been, and somebody seems to know that. Somebody thinks that that's important. There's something or something left that thinks that that has some sort of meaning. That's a story. That's still real time instead of apparent time. The end of the story is the end of knowing, the end of experience. And the end of the individual isn't necessarily the end of knowing and the end of experience.
So you mean the end of knowing means the end of individual, no? Because it needs the individual to know something.
Well, the end of knowing, is the end of it.
End of the individual, the
The
collapse
end
of
of
the
knowing.
individual.
Mhm.
But how about consciousness? Isn't there
There's no such thing as
No,
consciousness.
it's not.
Consciousness is a dream.
in the dream?
Just being pedantic, because if you want to say consciousness, you're going to have to talk about that's an object. What we're talking about is the end of subject-object, or the end of the experience of a subject which never was. So there's no subject-object. So there can't be any objective consciousness, awareness. That can't be unless there's someone to know it. It sounds so fantastic, but it's really quite simple. All we're talking about is this, without anybody in it that knows that. That's it. And not another this, not somewhere else. Exactly this, but without anybody in it that knows it.
So my question is just a question. There's no meaning, nothing at all. But there's an individual behind who wants to know.
Yeah.
But the act of questioning is, there's no root to it. No.
Well, the individual, there's no root to it either.
Yes, but still the act, the acting of the questioning, there's, what is it?
It's the same as the individual, it's the same as everything else. It's nothing or no thing. It's unknowing. It's the mystery appearing as an individual or a question. That's the problem for the individual. It thinks that there's something really separate from the mystery, and it wants to find the mystery. What it can't know, but what is still the reality, it is the mystery. that questions the mystery. There is only the mystery. There is only unknowing. That's why it can't be found. It's not anywhere else.
So you can't say you are what is. Is that wrong?
There is only what is. There's no you in it. There is only what is.
Yes, there is only what is.
Whatever appears is what is. And for the individual, that's a finger on a hand that's being moved by Jim. In reality, that's just simply everything. Nothing appearing as everything.
Yes, it was the only chance I had with people talking about non-duality,
Yeah.
that I said, you are what is. But I see what you say.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's interesting for me. For me.
Yeah, what is? What?
Yes, this in context with consciousness that you are, maybe you could say you are consciousness, you are realizing yourself as consciousness.
No, not really.
It's not right. We discussed about.
Well, it's just because what you're doing is you're putting it into a context,
Yes.
into something that could be understood. And what's being pointed to here is this, to not another this, but what is completely not unknowable. It can't be understood.
Yes.
It can't be told. It can't be explained.
Yes. But it's always this discussion. But it happens through me or something like this. People are always saying,
No.
but it happens.
But that's not true.
It's
It
not
doesn't.
true.
It doesn't happen through anyone.
Yes. Yes, of course, I can see it, yes.
There isn't anyone.
Yeah.
There isn't even a real position. There's no real here.
Yes, I can see it clear at the moment. That's the topic, this ego, this contraction, this
Yeah.
energetic
Mm.
whatever. Yes. But that's really war, if you are discussing, and I've met people, spirituality people, and so you can imagine they did all this family constipation,
Aufstellung.
sets,
Yeah.
yes, and so on. And they, it was really war, because they said that's so utterly arrogant to speak about non-duality in this way, that there is no one here and nothing is happening, and that's, yeah, it was really war. Yes. There's no solution if you are meeting or discussing in time.
Well, it doesn't make sense in time.
No, it doesn't.
Or it actually tries to, and it doesn't.
Yes.
Because what is doesn't make sense.
Yes. So you could say, if you are in contact with friends or something, like, it's utterly futile to speak or to try to speak or
This absolutely never speaks about it.
yes.
If there's not a question, there's nothing here
Yes.
that has anybody tell anyone anything. Because
Yes.
in reality, this doesn't actually see any individuals.
Yes, forget it, because
there aren't
if
any
it happens,
individuals.
it happens, and if
No,
not,
it's not that if it happens, it happens. It's that there's no who would you tell and what would you say? What's out of place? Unless there's somebody that says, no, it's like this, then it's like, no, well, not really. But if nobody says, yeah, I'm here, who are you talking to?
yes, so let's forget all that.
So I have one question. Why you use the term Advaita? Advaita is a philosophy 5,000 years old, and there is quite a solid, let's say, concept with it. So using that term, it might be.
But I don't know whether I should argue with you or not, because a little bit I'll have to say, in the Vedas it's actually called Advaita Vedanta. And I don't say Advaita Vedanta, because first off I find that a misunderstanding if you call it the knowing of unknowing, or the knowing of not to. That doesn't make any sense to me. But Advaita, I find, is a very, it's just an old term for calling it not to, and people seem to have some sort of relationship with it, so that's why I use it.
But it's heavy, huh? The term is heavy, huh?
Yeah.
It sounds great.
No, but there's a concept behind.
Behind Advaita Vedanta. Advaita itself, is that ever used just as Advaita?
What is it, Advaita, without it?
Not to.
Yeah, it's a Sanskrit
Advaita
word.
Vedanta is the...
Well, it's a Sanskrit word, no? Advaita.
Yeah,
It's not two, that's it,
Yeah, exactly.
But it implies a philosophy which is 5,000 years old.
But when you, just to be clear, when you're talking about the philosophy, that's Advaita Vedanta, isn't it?
It's a little bit mixed because he used this term Advaita for Advaita Vedanta. No?
Who did?
Well, in India it's used Advaita for saying Advaita Vedanta because Vedanta
okay.
is a section of the Upanishad.
I know, yeah. I thought by just saying Advaita, I was sort of coupling myself from
but you're using a term by crashing everything, but then you use a term which is heavy, with concept, loaded with concept.
Yeah, like God.
Yeah, something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what you are saying doesn't fit to anything. No?
Well, yes and no. For me, most or a lot of religions actually are trying to say exactly the same thing. I know that in Buddhism, in Christianity, in Dzogchen, in Advaita Vedanta, you can find a lot of the things that are being shared here and there.
But they all have a path, no?
Well, see, I don't know what happens there. For me, what happens is you've got somebody that might be like this, who says, all there is purity. And then there's somebody out there in the audience that says, oh, he said everything is purity. Well, I don't feel pure, so I have to become pure. And he has some experiences of purity and thinks, oh, well, I ate white rice before I had that experience of purity, so white rice must have something to do with purity. And completely covering over the reality that what's being shared is there is only purity. So there are these kernels of, I think, of what's being shared here and there, and it gets covered over time with paths and hope and people that think they know what he's trying to say and they'll explain it to you for you. What's being said is so illogical and irrational that even if you wrote it down, it would be misunderstood. It's so easy to misunderstand because it doesn't fit into the logic of the individual, that there's an individual that needs to find something, and it can find that through its own experience of free will and choice. The end of the individual and the recognition or revelation that what is everything, and without need, and without cause, and without anything missing, is a surprise. It's a complete surprise. It's always a surprise. Here it's always a surprise. It never turns anything that was before. It never turns anything into anything that was known. So that's not very easy, I think, to put into words and get that across. That's why these meetings happen. Because it's not like that anything new is being said here. But there's ideas or concepts that build up around it. And then there comes a question, and then, they're sort of undermined.
Where do you see the connection to Christianity?
In the Gospel of St. Thomas, I think he says, I will make an arm and a leg a leg.
Please, I didn't understand.
There's a gospel, one of the Gnostic Gospels or something, I think one of the hidden Gospels, called the Gospel of St. Thomas. And in there he says, I will make an arm and a leg, which for me means everything is just what it is. There's nothing between it. Nothing needs to be different. Everything is just simply what it is. Or the cornerstone that's always rejected. I would say that this sharing, what's being said here is the cornerstone which is always rejected. Because it has to be. This has to be rejected. I am the way, the life, and the truth. Here, what I hear is that this is, or what is, the way, the life, and the truth. There is only what is. There's nowhere else.
And it also continues, and you shall find it only through that path. I am the way, the life, and so on. And you shall find it only through me.
Yeah.
Me finding the way, the truth. So for me it seems in this there is no two, there is two searching. There is the individual searching for the truth, for what's real. So there is still a dialogue between nothing and nothing in a way.
Well, nothing and nothing would
for
never
the
be
mind,
in
this is
fact.
very difficult
Excuse
to.
me?
For my mind, for the concept, it's quite difficult to understand this. Okay, this is it.
No, but I don't understand it.
Oh,
This isn't about understanding this. This is about the end of the need to understand this. All that's being suggested here is that there's a contracted sense of energy
Yeah.
which covers over what is
Mm-hmm.
through the search of meaning.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That experience does not actually have any effect on what is. And the collapse of it happens for no reason, and what's left is what is. Which is all there is. That's not complicated. Is it?
Yes, not.
No.
No.
There's no denial of anything.
No.
What's being suggested here is that time and everything that appears like coming here and all the rest of it is real and unreal. It's empty.
Yes, it's really.
It has no real contingency. Nothing depends upon any of it. It's only the arising of the contracted sense of energy which says, I am real, which is then dependent upon all of that. That's the only unreal thing in this whole story, and the whole appearance is the experience of being an individual. Everything else is just simply what it is.
Yes, and so that's the solution for me, becoming real and unreal. Everything is real and unreal.
Yeah.
Would you say that the practice of being aware of the moment and not thinking and doing interpretation and imagination all the time, that constant spiral of thinking about things and not being in the moment and practicing to be in that moment and just perceive it, that it helps?
Well, the individual, I think, is tortured by thoughts and feelings. And because the individual can't imagine a world without it, the best it can imagine is to detach from thoughts and feelings, which are its connection, it thinks, to the whole world. So if it can detach from that, it feels better. So by being in this imaginary now, by concentrating on the senses of the body and detaching from what is going on, in that sense, it could find some relief. But what it doesn't know, what it can't imagine, is that its attachment to all of that and everything else that happens is the result of it being unreal, is the result of it being a figment that arises, and therefore, in defending what it thinks it knows, called here, it has to use an imaginary free will and choice, which is incredibly ineffective, and try to control everything that's happening out there. What happens when the individual dies, feelings are then feelings, and thoughts are then thoughts, and nobody cares.
So we think
individual, you could think of it as an action. The action of the individual is this. It does this to thoughts and feelings with its little sieve. It is trying to filter out everything that's important and put it into boxes and things that it calls
a self.
Well, confirm itself. Actually, its whole energy, its whole action is finding a solution to itself. It wants to solve the problem of itself. That's what it's trying to do.
I find that through meditation, I've been doing meditation now for 3 years, a lot of things resolved for me, and I feel some nothingness, but this is not the nothingness that we're talking about here. But that there was so much illusion in my life, and I'm much lighter now, and I think that this, I don't know how, non-duality or spiritual enlightenment is this, are the same things?
Not really.
Not really, but
not at all, actually.
That they lead to ultimate or absolute nothingness or lightness.
Right. For me, absolute nothingness or absolute lightness are projections of the individual. That feels like something special needs to happen for it to be okay. Because it experiences itself as special, it actually experiences itself as the most important person in the world and the center of the universe. So it imagines that there's something really special, like a Buddha or a God, is going to happen to it to solve the problem of itself. Really, it's exceptionally simple. It's really just this. It doesn't need to be special. It's the ordinariness of what is what it's really looking for, but it has no idea that that's what it's looking for. None whatsoever. It's not actually looking for that. It's looking to confirm and maintain itself, but the solution to itself is what it is. And it never finds it. It's the end of it. But there's no suggestion here that there shouldn't be meditation. What is suggested is that doesn't actually touch what we're talking about here. The experience of separation.
And what touches this?
Nothing. Because there's nothing separate from it.
The experience of what's going on here is not just nothing.
The experience of what's going on here is the problem. What's being suggested here isn't that the experience of what's going on here is the solution to the problem of I. What's being said here is the solution to the problem of I is the end of experience. The individual lives in a world where it's inside the body. It's inside, the I lives inside the body. And everything else is outside. And it's that interaction between those two, which it calls its life. That's an illusion. There is no real inside, and there is no real outside. So when the individual dies, that inside the body dies, and that outside the body falls away. And there is only what is, and that is not an experience.
And that's not an experience.
No.
It's just nothing.
It's actually everything.
So between nothing and everything, there is no.
And that's what the individual is stuck in a position. And its position is everything and nothing, nothing and everything, being and consciousness, I know consciousness. There's always two. What it can't get and will never get, but the way it is that this is no thing, everythinging, or everythinging no-thinking, or empty isness. This is that. This is those two. This is non-dual. There's no position here to know anything about what's being said. There is just simply everything.
Could one use the term being instead of everything?
You can call it God. The thing you can call it consciousness. You can call it anything. Actually, you can call it dog shit. Just as long as all there is dog shit, then we're talking about the same thing. But if you got dog shit and not dog shit, then we're lost. But as long as it's everything, because in a way, as long as it's everything, it doesn't mean anything. So absolute doesn't mean anything. Infinite doesn't mean anything.
So being would be close to it, no?
As long as there's only being,
yes.
Then we're talking about the same thing. It doesn't matter what the word is.
Because no being doesn't exist. I mean,
nothing exists, nothing doesn't exist. There is only what is. The point is that what is absolute. And if you want to call it absolute, you want to call it wine, you want to call it flowers, you want to call it shit, you want to call it anything. Put anything in there you want. It's not that, but it's everything. It's absolute. So it's not really a word.
And there's no relative.
Right. Apparently there's a relative. Just like apparently there's time, or else these words wouldn't make sense.
Mm.
But that's just the absolute timing.
Some people say the relative is inside the absolute, or contained in the absolute. That's not true, is it?
Sounds okay to me. I wouldn't have said that.
Mm.
But that's what I said at the beginning, actually, that within the non-dual, there's an apparent arising of the individual, which is the same thing as the relative appears in the absolute.
Mm.
it is said that when the me is collapsing, the absolute is recognizing the absolute, which is not an experience. Is it this what you...
I wouldn't have said that.
No?
It seems to me that this illusory experience is what reveals the absolute, because there's nothing that can actually recognize the absolute, because it's all there is. There's no distance to it. So it's this apparent happening which reveals what everything is. And it is not.
Is it to you possible, or the contradiction to pursue this ego death?
Well, I don't know what you mean by ego death, but if you're talking about what's being shared here,
Or the collapse of
the individual.
the individual, the contradiction to pursue that, sorry, and to have a strong purpose in life, to fight for something.
Well, both of those suggest that there's free will and choice, and there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't there not a difference between that you can say, I can do what I will, but I can't will what I will?
No, there's no difference, because there's no one that could do either one of those.
Mm-hmm. It's very strict and radical. You are so utterly radical. I don't know.
No, the point is,
I want to believe you.
this isn't. No, don't believe me. Definitely don't believe me. If you had a choice,
No, I
don't believe me. It's not personal. This message doesn't belong to me.
Yeah.
I'm not making this up.
No,
Who
sometimes.
could make it up? No, but it's just the way it is.
Yes.
There isn't.
I
See,
know.
that question comes from the experience that there's something else.
Yeah.
There's actually real time in which there's a real person that could make a real decision about something that's really going to happen. None of that's true. There is no real time. There isn't anything else. There's nothing going to happen. this is nothing happening.
Just maybe that you can do what you want.
Who's going to do that?
But yes, that's how can I say, a holiday in the me.
Who's going to?
For the me. Why not?
Well, no, there's no individual that has that choice.
Yes.
It's harder with family
To what?
to deal with.
No. What can happen is when this is being heard, that whole contraction can unravel a bit. And this contraction in relationships has a lot to do with games.
Yeah.
And so when those games start to fall away, it can be difficult because the games aren't the same. But nobody's doing that.
Yeah, that's hard to believe with family. Yeah. So why is it?
Well, it isn't, so that's the end of that. There is no real position. There is no real here, and nothing is known.
Nothing. When you say this is what I cannot really grasp. When you say
No, me either.
this cannot be known,
Yeah.
and what I understand is it cannot be known as a concept, but when I touch, I know the touch.
But that's exactly the problem of the individual. The individual knows what this feels like. It knows this is happening.
Yeah.
That's duality. That's the trap. That's the illusion. Because really, when it knows this in the context of the room and the meeting and coming here and what I have to do tonight and what I have to do tomorrow and these are my hands. The reality is, this is just everything. What's being said here isn't coming from authority. There's no one sitting up here who knows something that's trying to tell somebody something. If it's being heard, then all that is friendship. It's not an authority. There's no master.
Master G.
You better watch you like you feel.
The individual knows it doesn't know, and so it wants somebody who does. And so that's the reason it's desperate for somebody to tell it what to do.
That's actually my question. Now, what to do?
Well, there's no one to do it.
Yes. But still, there is unhappiness sometimes, there's this.
So why not? That's equally the mystery.
Yeah.
Unhappiness is just the mystery appearing as unhappiness. This doesn't have any solidity to it.
Right?
This doesn't have any solidity to it. Solidity. It's not solid.
Yeah.
So happiness, unhappiness, is just something that appears and flows through this.
Mm.
The experience of the individual is solid.
Mm.
So the experience of unhappiness is then solid.
Mm.
It doesn't pass through, it means something. And because it's happening to someone needs to do something about it. And it needs to do something about happiness and unhappiness. Happiness it wants to hold on to, and unhappiness it wants to get rid of.
Mm.
It has to be an action of everything. This isn't solid though. So even the experience of solidity And the experience of relationship is just an appearance of the mystery. It's not real.
So the emotion is not real, it's not solid, and this one is also not solid. So
There's nothing solid. It's all just an appearance. And it's through that psychic experience of solidity that something else is then created. That experience that there's somewhere else and something else that could be found which will make this feel better.
So does that mean the senses, like seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, are they heightened?
Through the individual? No, they're deadened.
They're deadened, and then when the individual is gone?
Well, all you can really say is they're no longer deadened, because who's going to know they're heightened?
Okay.
There's no one left comparing. But there is that instant of recognizing that nothing was ever seen before as it was.
There are no steps.
That what is everything. The illusion is that there's something separate. If there's nothing separate, where would one move to? What steps would one take to find what's not separate?
In my imagination, there can be more and more transparency.
It's in your experience, actually.
Yeah.
In your experience, there can be more and more transparency.
Yeah.
That's the dream. That more and more transparency does not lead to the end of the dream.
Yeah. So there's a feeling of being an individual here,
Yeah?
but
Apparently.
I can't help myself.
No, absolutely not.
So now what?
Exactly. That is the reality for the individual. Now what?
So I can't stop suffering.
There isn't any real you.
It feels like.
I know, that's the dream. It's a complete illusion. And in that psychic world, it has apparent movement from not so good, meditating a couple of years, things feeling better, apparent transparency, hope. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now?
Well, that's a dream. All of that's being described is what is, appearing as that, is the mystery, appearing as that, is unknowing, appearing as that. It's like a drop in the ocean, suddenly experiencing itself as something other than the ocean. What happens when the drop no longer experiences itself as separate from the ocean, but is again part of the ocean? What changed? What changes? What happens? An illusory experience that a drop in the center of the ocean could be separate from the ocean. That's what changes. Was that real? Was there ever really a separate drop in the ocean? And so, if that separate drop goes through stages where it feels less separate from the ocean, does that really make it less separate from the ocean? Did that change anything?
Good concept. That's good.
The individual has no idea what I'm talking about. It can't imagine that this is what it's looking for, because it already knows what this is and has checked it off as not it. The individual is very, very simple. Unbelievably simple, actually. It's a contraction in the body, which immediately at the same time is then the search for meaning and purpose in everything. And it's doing it constantly. Jim put his hand there, that meant something. Jim didn't answer that, that meant something. That cup is there, he's drinking water, no, that meant something. I'll look at the way my foot's moving, oh, that means something. Ah, everything's beautiful, oh, I'm getting close. Everything is put into a box. And it needs a box because the individual is on a journey to finding out what the problem is, to solving its issue. And becoming more transparent seems to be better than being less transparent. It's a dream. The whole thing is like a drop in the ocean, thinking it's becoming more of the ocean. And then the dream of separation dies, and nobody wakes up because there never was anything separate. The drop was never separate. And the whole story that it had disappears because there was never real any separation for it to happen. And what's revealed is that this, exactly as it is a mystery. There's absolutely nothing that can be known about it. So it's actually no thing appearing to be this, or nothing happening. It's emptiness appearing as this.
I just had a question in my mind. I didn't know how to formulate it, but now it's, again, the personality wanting to know something. The question was, what perceives this? But this is something that a personality wants, to know what perceives what is.
The individual perceives what is.
Yes.
That's the only thing that perceives.
And in a way it's illusion. What is
Perception is
perception?
an appearance.
Like this name. On the other hand, I think this is a big joke. We walk around suffering and thinking we have to do something, whatever. So it's like a contradiction. On one hand, it's just amazing wonder how it all works. If it, looking like it's something where it's nothing. And on the other hand, people are miserable and fighting and doing all kinds of stuff. The joke.
Cosmic joke.
It's a cosmic joke.
It's a cosmic joke, yeah.
So who's laughing?
Yeah, there's a joke that goes along with that. Tony tells it. What does he say?
God is the only comedian with an audience that
Never laughs. That's it.
The audience that never laughs.
Yeah. Not trying to tell you anything, but it's not really nothing being something. It's nothing something. It's the same thing. There's not like nothing somewhere else where all this comes from and takes form and becomes something. There's not really something else. There's just this.
Just this.
This is nothing. At the moment, for me, the best way to describe it is just to say it's a mystery.
Yeah.
There's just there's just mystery.
Difficult, right? And then, in a sense, this is also why the practice is so rewarding, because gradually, hopefully you will be able to deal even with these very difficult situations. And the person, of course, who benefits the most from that will be yourself, because the idea of being able to let go and have compassion is just very, very beneficial. The person who benefits the most is always ourselves in these kind of situations. So I agree with you, it is very challenging, but it is also, in a sense, what the Buddha is asking us to do. You know, one of the most famous similes of the Buddha is the famous simile of the saw. And the simile of the saw is the simile where, you know, bandits kind of get hold of you and they pin you to the ground and they take out the big saw and they hack you to bits with a saw. And the Buddha says that whoever gives rise to a mind of ill will or a mind of whatever, you know, negative mind state, while they do that, is not practicing my teaching. So the Buddha is, you know, he's basically setting the bar incredibly high. And what that means, it doesn't mean that we should despair if we can't clear that bar, because it's very hard to clear. But what it means is that this practice can have some extraordinary results. If we do practice it in the right way, if we keep on going, even though we may not be able to understand how it can be done, if we keep going, those results will eventually happen. And that is kind of the promise of the Buddha. And that is what is so extraordinary. So even though you know, and I can obviously not fully understand what you're talking about because I'm not in that situation myself, but I have some idea because we all had difficult experiences in our life. You know, even though you cannot see the solution right now to that kind of situation, keep on going, and one day the solution will appear. Suddenly, you have put all of these things behind you, and you see, wow, I can do it now. Isn't that amazing? And you will actually see those people in a different way. You see yourself in a different way. And you're able to let go of things that actually, for most people, are impossible to let go of. And then you know that you're really reaping the benefits of this practice. So just keep going. Just don't lose heart. Know that these results are possible because there are people in the world. I meet people in my life who are extraordinary. People who are just never get angry at all. I have lived with people for 30 years who I have never seen angry, and that's kind
I can only hope for the best now. Swear I've been getting up a little less now. Only ever seen me with my head down, hoping that today I won't stand out. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, childism, childism. Wake up, eat, school, repeat. Wake up just to fall asleep. No idea where I won't be. Same shit like every week. So boredom just got bored of me. Being young's been haunting me. Wish that I could wake up just to know that this is all a dream. Suffocating in my thoughts. Wanna stand up, yet I'm too afraid to fall. Why you make me feel small? Can't tell if my friends are my friends at all. I be feeling kinda lost, feeling loose and double-crossed. Nearly every day I try to break away, I'm losing all of my loss. And I can only hope for the best now. But I've been getting up a little less now. Only ever seen me with my head down, hoping that today I won't stand out. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, childism, childism. I'm just gonna try and get away. Music takes me to a better place. Patronize me to my face. Sick of doing what they say. People be asking me where I go. Right now I don't even know. Lately I've been setting goals, cause life ain't all about the goal. I've been venting through my music, inventing some new shit. Got one chance to hope I use it. Goddamn, I hope I do, cause now I see life from a different view. It ain't about what they teaching you. I'ma choose which way I go, cause I'm sick of always feeling low. I can only hope for the best now. But I've been getting up a little less now. Only ever seen me with my head down, hoping that today I won't stand out. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, 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 hey. Childism, childism, childism. I'm just looking for a way out. Where I'm going's hard to say now. I'm hoping that that today I won't stand up. I can only hope for the best now, but I've been getting up a little less now. Only ever see me with my head down, hoping that today I won't stand out. Childism, 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 childism. You are my world, you are my everything. Why?